It was quite a historic day for the city of Superior. Joining us now to analyze what the president had to say is Cyndy Rugeley, Associate Professor and Department Head of Political Science at UMD. And Dr. Rugeley, thank you so much for being with us. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you.
This was an important event for Superior, for Duluth too. What impact does a visit of a sitting president have on a city?
One, it's a morale booster. I mean, people get to see the president, and it does make you feel pretty good that he takes time out to do it. Politically, but you know, that's yet to be determined. I'm sure that, you know, he maybe fired up folks that he had supported him before and were a little bit doubtful now. And with the governor's races coming up, a Senate race in Wisconsin, and House and Senate members all up, it's probably a good thing for him to try to, you know, get the charm flowing.
There you go. Did his Superior speech touting the $1 trillion infrastructure package hit home with the folks here, do you think?
I think it did. I mean, he did some things that were, you know, that the way he cast it was not just, you know, brick and mortars. He talked about it leading to jobs, leading to investments, leading into economic benefit for the area. So it was a good approach to do. And so, I mean, he talked about labor union. He was actually introduced by a local labor union person. One of the things I find interesting is that the Democrats had traditionally owned the Made in America, and Trump took that away from them. And so it looks like he's trying to take it back.
He didn't touch only on work issues, things of this nature. In his speech, the president also said, do not defund the police, but fund the police.
Right.
How did that hit home locally?
You know, probably pretty well. I mean, a lot of the, you know, the more moderate, it was a bad message to begin with. I mean, if you have to go and write 500-word op-eds to explain what you're talking about, you probably need to change the message a little bit. But I think that a lot of Democrats, particularly the more moderate ones like President Biden is, didn't like having to run on that, didn't like having to answer to it. So I think it was in his benefit to say, yeah, we're funding the police. It also, in more competitive districts, a lot of Republicans voted against some bills that included funding police in there. So it does give them a way to use it in competitive districts.
Professor, people like to see their presidents. They like to go out, and if the president's in town, they like to see him. Well, President Biden did not hold a major public event in the city of Superior or Duluth, but this was an invitation-only event. Right. So it was unlike John Kennedy. Bill Clinton was here and spoke to a big crowd. Jimmy Carter once or twice. George W. Bush was here speaking to big crowds. Was that a mistake?
I think he would get more leverage if he did, you know, let people in and speak to them and have the big crowds and things like that. You know, it's not his style anymore. He used to be that way. I don't know why he limits it, but yeah, I think it was a mistake. I mean, I think that, you know, one, having people yelling and clapping for you adds enthusiasm. So yeah, I think so.
They become quite large rallies, actually, if he's speaking to, say, the deck full of people.
Right, and you know, previous presidents have done that, and you know, it doesn't seem to be his style. I mean, I think that he tries to come down here. I mean, his goal, the reason he does these things is because it talks to the local media. It gets you and I talking about it tonight. And so, you know, you're not going to cut through something like that to say, oh, and the national media is not going to say, and oh, by the way, in Duluth, Minnesota, they're going to fix a bridge.
Right, exactly.
So, you know, that's the reason why he does it, to get the television attention and things. And so, you know, it's not his style. I think he would be more successful if it was.
What did you think of the President's State of the Union message?
That was, it was interesting. I mean, I've always thought the State of the Union is they try to cram too much in a 3-pound bag, you know, but I think it was, he tried to establish, you know, bipartisanship, and then, you know, that was the start of his speech, talking about Ukraine and uniting the country and uniting. Went into a little bit of the, you know, the tax scam, as he calls it, which was most certainly not a bipartisan message. But again, you know, I thought he hit on some good points. Again, a lot of it gets lost because there's so much. But, you know, the young man he had stand up the child, $35, you know, stood out, you know, having the Ukrainian person there, you know, and that's become a tradition with presidents now to have their guests and introduce them and, you know, for messages they're making. Does it do much to say all of a sudden all the Republicans will say, yes, we're all going to have to? No, I mean, it's probably not. And I mean, there are fundamental differences between the parties on some of these issues. And so, you know, there are some, you know, I think maybe too much on both sides of just voting against something because the other guy proposed it. But there are fundamental differences, and sometimes that gets lost in all of this.
How is his approach, do you think, to the Russian invasion of Ukraine playing here at home?
I think good. I think well. I think that, I think that probably a lot of times it happens on the State of Union's address that they get a nice little bump, in approval, and I suspect he's going to get one. I think here it's playing well. Just look what happened when they didn't want to light up the bridge.
Right.
So, I think people are very much behind the country, standing behind Ukraine. I think they're pretty much, aware that, what Putin's doing is pretty dangerous.
The president's national approval rating has been a little bit on the low side.
Yeah.
Did his State of the Union speech help him, do you think?
I think it did. Now, how long it'll help? It's not unusual for presidents. It's called going public, where they go public to gather support. It's not unusual after a speech like that for them to get a bump. In his case, I think that a lot of people like the fact that he wants to be a decent guy. That he's a nice fella. I think a lot of people like that, so that helps him. I think, combined with what is probably a natural little bit of a rally around effect because of Ukraine. So yeah, I think it helped him. Is it a long term? Generally, president's approvals ratings, they go up, they go down, but him hitting 39% was pretty bad. And I think a lot of that stemmed from COVID fatigue, to tell you the truth.
Do you think his speech is playing well internationally?
Yeah, I do. It depends on where you are. It's probably not a big hit in Russia.
Probably
not. But it's, I think that among our allies in NATO, particularly, with the former administration pretty much saying, casting shade on NATO, I think that, his standing with them and being a leader in it has really, helped.
What do you think catapulted Joe Biden into office?
Voting against. I've always maintained that there was only one candidate in 2020, and that was Donald Trump. People either voted largely for him or voted largely against him.
So that's probably, it was his opponent that got him into office then.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that a lot of people have known him for a long time and they trust him, and he was the polar opposite of Trump. He's not a divisive person. And I think a lot of people like the fact that he's a nice guy. I think his positive message, and I think also, honestly, COVID. And the fact that Trump didn't have much empathy or didn't show much empathy on that played a big difference. There's a lot of reasons why you could say Trump lost, but yeah, I think and I think that a lot of people wanted him to bring some stability and end COVID, and I think that's the reason why. I think that, maybe he needs to take the win now.
Our country is strongly divided right along party lines. Does President Biden have any chance of healing that division?
I think, George W. Bush went into office thinking that he could do that, and he couldn't. Barack Obama thought he could do it. I think it's really hard, and I think that, I think some of the, loudmouths on both sides get far more attention than their role in Congress deserves. But I think it's pretty set now, and I think it's tough. I think it'd be difficult. He is doing better than some others have done, and so I think that, and I think he's got friendships in the Senate, but those don't overcome partisan desires.
We don't see much of Vice President Kamala Harris. Is she presidential material?
She's done a lot. You didn't see much of Mike Pence either when he was it.
You don't see much of vice presidents, do you?
No, you don't. And but she's had some pretty important roles. So, is she? I don't know. People say vice presidents are, but it's been a while since really. Bush was elected when he was vice president, served one term, but the rest of them not so much.
Right.
They're
and with that, we have to leave it. Thank you so very much, Dr. Cynthia Rugeley, from UMD, political science professor. And we really appreciate you. I know you watched that speech and appreciate your viewpoints.
It was great to see you guys again.
Thank you. Nice to see you again.